Sometimes the people who are supposed to love you the most are the ones who hurt you the deepest. Before I tell you how my parents froze when they saw my little boy after 5 years, please, if you believe every woman deserves a second chance, hit that like button and subscribe to Kindness Tales Live. This story might just change the way you see forgiveness forever. I still remember that morning, the way sunlight spilled through my bedroom curtains, how I pressed my hands against my stomach and whispered to the tiny life growing inside me. I should have been happy. I was happy, but behind that smile was a fear so heavy it almost drowned me, because I knew once my parents found out my world would never be the same. They were strict, traditional, and obsessed with what the neighbors thought. My father was a retired Army officer, disciplined, proud, and unyielding. My mother, a quiet woman who lived in his shadow, feared him more than she ever loved him. For them, honor was everything, and in their eyes I had just destroyed it. When I told them I was pregnant, silence filled the room like a storm about to break. My mother's teacup slipped from her hand, shattering across the floor. My father didn't move for a full minute. Then slowly his face turned red, not with embarrassment but with rage. "Whose child is it?" he demanded. I opened my mouth to speak, but no words came out. He didn't wait for an answer. "Pack your things. You are no longer my daughter." Those words hit harder than any slap could have. My mother sobbed quietly, begging him to reconsider, but he turned his back and walked out of the room. That was the last time I ever saw the man who raised me, for 5 long years. I left that night with nothing but a small suitcase and the ultrasound picture I'd kept folded in my wallet. The baby's tiny form was barely visible, but to me he was already everything. I took a bus to another city, slept in a women's shelter for a while, and worked 2 jobs just to survive. Some nights when the world felt too heavy, I'd press my hand over my stomach and whisper, "You're my reason now." When my son Noah was born, everything changed again. But this time, for the better. The first time I held him, all the pain, rejection, and loneliness melted away. He had my eyes, my smile, and the gentleness I once saw in my mother. Even though I had nothing, I had him. But raising a child alone wasn't easy. I worked late shifts at a diner, then cleaned offices at night. Sometimes I'd come home so tired that I'd fall asleep sitting beside Noah's crib. Still, every time he laughed or reached for my hand, I knew it was worth it. Every sacrifice, every tear, every lonely night. Years passed quietly. I stopped hoping my parents would come looking for me. I stopped imagining my father's forgiveness or my mother's voice on the phone. I built a new life brick by brick, a small apartment, a kind landlady, a few friends who became my family. And through it all, Noah grew, bright, kind, and full of life. Then one day, fate decided to test my heart again. It started with a call from my old hometown. My cousin Sarah was getting married. She begged me to come. "Everyone's changed," she said. "Even your parents. They miss you." I almost hung up, but something in her voice, maybe hope, maybe guilt, made me say yes. 5 years had passed since that night, and though I told myself I was ready, I wasn't. When I stepped back into that familiar town with Noah holding my hand, every memory came flooding back. The smell of my mother's cooking, the echo of my father's footsteps, the laughter that used to fill our home. What I didn't know was that my parents were there at the wedding too. And when they saw the little boy standing beside me, my son, the world around us went completely still. Their faces froze, and in that silence I realized this was the moment I had been both dreading and waiting for. For a moment it felt like time stopped. The music, the chatter, the laughter, all of it faded into silence as my parents' eyes locked on mine. My father stood near the entrance, frozen in disbelief, while my mother's hand trembled against her chest. My little boy Noah squeezed my fingers and whispered, "Mama, who are they?" I swallowed hard, forcing a smile I didn't feel. "They're just someone I used to know," I said softly, but my voice cracked halfway through. My cousin Sarah rushed over and hugged me tightly. "You came. Oh, I'm so happy you came," she whispered, then looked down at Noah. "And this must be your son. He's adorable." Her warmth was the only thing keeping me from falling apart. I could still feel my parents' eyes on me, like ghosts from a past I had tried so hard to bury. My heart pounded so loud I could barely hear Sarah's words. When I finally looked back toward them, my mother had taken a hesitant step forward. Her eyes shimmered with tears, but my father's expression was cold, unreadable. He looked older, his once dark hair now gray, his shoulders not as straight as I remembered. Yet his pride was still there, standing like a wall between us. Noah tugged at my sleeve. "Mama, can I get some juice?" I nodded quickly, grateful for the excuse. "Go ahead, sweetheart. Stay where I can see you." He ran off toward the refreshment table, his laughter slicing through the tension. That sound, my son's innocent laughter, seemed to shake something in my mother. She suddenly moved toward him as if drawn by instinct. My breath caught in my throat. I wanted to stop her, but my feet wouldn't move. I just watched as she knelt beside Noah, smiling gently. "Hi there," she said softly. "What's your name?" "Noah," he replied, grinning. "What's yours?" Her lips trembled. "You can call me Nana," he giggled. "Nana? That's funny." She laughed too, a sound I hadn't heard in years. And just like that, the walls around my heart began to crack. Then my father's voice thundered across the hall. "Mary!" The sound froze us all. My mother stood quickly, guilt flashing in her eyes. My father walked toward us, his steps firm, his face like stone. "So," he said, his gaze burning into me, "you decided to show up after all these years?" I took a deep breath. I didn't come to start a scene. I just came to see Sarah get married. "Then you should have stayed at the back," he snapped. "People are talking already." There it was, the same obsession with reputation, the same blindness to what really mattered. The morning light filtered through the thin curtains of my small rented room. Noah was still asleep, his little hand resting on my arm. I stared at him, tracing the curve of his cheek with my eyes, wondering if I'd done the right thing by showing up yesterday. The reunion had left a storm in my chest. Old wounds reopened, words left unsaid, and emotions I thought I'd buried long ago. I was about to get up and make breakfast when a soft knock echoed through the door. Once, then again. I frowned. It was barely 7. "Maybe the landlady?" Quietly, I slipped my arm from under Noah's and went to open it. When I pulled the door open, I froze. It was her, my mother. She stood there in a simple blue shawl, her eyes swollen from crying. For a long second, neither of us said anything. The years that had stretched between us seemed to crumble into silence. Then she whispered, "Can I come in?" I stepped aside without a word. She walked in slowly, looking around the small room. The worn-out sofa, the chipped table, Noah's toy car lying on the floor. It was a far cry from the tidy home she used to keep, but it was ours. Her gaze stopped on Noah, still asleep on the bed. She pressed her trembling hand to her mouth, stifling a sob. "He looks just like you when you were little," she murmured. "Yeah," I said quietly. "Except he laughs more." That made her smile, a small, broken smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. She turned to me. "I couldn't sleep last night. I kept seeing him, and you. I wanted to come sooner, but your father..." She trailed off. "He still hates me," I finished for her. She shook her head slowly. "No, he doesn't hate you. He hates himself. But he doesn't know how to say it." I crossed my arms, not sure if I could believe that. "He threw me out, Mom. He told me I was dead to him. How do you come back from that?" Tears welled up again in her eyes. "We were wrong, both of us. Your father thought being strict was love. I thought staying silent was loyalty. We lost you because we were too proud to understand." She took a shaky breath. "When I saw Noah yesterday, I realized what we'd missed: 5 years of birthdays, first steps, laughter. 5 years we can never get back." Her words hit me harder than I expected. I'd built so many walls to protect myself from the pain. But hearing her voice tremble like that broke something inside me. "Do you know how hard it was, Mom?" I whispered. "I begged for one phone call. I sent letters that came back unopened. I raised him alone, terrified every single day that I wouldn't be enough." She stepped forward, reaching for my hand. "But you are enough, sweetheart, you are. Look at him, he's healthy, kind, and loved. You did what we couldn't. You chose love over pride." Her words melted years of anger I didn't even realize I was still holding. My throat tightened as I looked at her. The woman who'd once brushed my hair and sang me lullabies. The woman who'd stood by silently when I was cast out. And yet here she was, standing in front of me, asking for forgiveness she didn't know how to put into words. Without thinking, I hugged her. For a moment, neither of us spoke. I felt her arms wrap around me tightly, like she was afraid to let go. I could feel her shoulders shaking. "I'm sorry," she whispered into my hair. For everything. For letting you go when you needed me most. I closed my eyes. I missed you, Mom, I said softly. So much. When we finally pulled apart, she wiped her tears and smiled faintly. Can I make him breakfast? She asked, glancing at Noah. I smiled through my own tears. He loves pancakes. She laughed quietly, and for the first time in years, the room felt like home. As she walked into the tiny kitchen, I stood there watching her. Something inside me shifted. A small spark of peace I hadn't felt in a long time. Maybe this was the start of something new. Maybe forgiveness wasn't about forgetting, but about healing. And as Noah stirred awake and saw her, he grinned sleepily. Nana, he said, his voice full of surprise. My mother's eyes filled again, but this time with joy. Yes, sweetheart. Nana's here. The following evening, the sun dipped low, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose. My mother had spent the day with us helping Noah build a tower of blocks on the floor, laughing every time it collapsed. I hadn't seen her laugh like that in years. It was soft, real, almost healing. But when she glanced at the clock and realized it was nearly 6, her smile faded. Your father will be home soon, she murmured, gathering her shawl. He doesn't know I came. I nodded. It's okay, Mom, I understand. Yet deep down I didn't want her to leave. For the first time in 5 years, I felt like I had part of my family back. She hesitated at the door, her fingers clutching the edge of her shawl. Lena, she said softly, he's not as strong as he once was. The guilt has been eating him alive. Just don't give up on him yet. Then she left, the door closing quietly behind her. That night, after I tucked Noah into bed, I sat by the window, watching the city lights flicker. My thoughts wandered to my father, the man who taught me to ride a bike, who used to carry me on his shoulders, who stopped speaking to me the day I needed him most. The anger I'd held for years began to mix with something else, pity, maybe even longing. The next morning, just as I was pouring coffee, a firm knock echoed through the door. My heart skipped. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened it, my breath caught in my throat. It was him. My father stood there, his expression guarded, his hat in his hand. His hair was grayer than I remembered, his eyes tired. For a moment, we just stared at each other, the silence louder than any words. May I come in? He asked finally, his voice quieter than I expected. I stepped aside, unsure if I was dreaming. He walked in slowly, his gaze sweeping across the small apartment before landing on the framed photo of Noah on the shelf. He looks like you, he said softly. He's still sleeping, I replied. He nodded, his fingers tightening around his hat. Mary told me she came here yesterday. I didn't know what to say, so I stayed quiet. He took a long breath, as if trying to find the right words. I was angry back then, he said finally. Angry at you, at myself, at the world. I thought I was protecting you from shame, but all I did was protect my pride. His voice trembled on that last word, and it startled me. I never heard my father sound so human. You hurt me, I said softly. You turned your back when I needed you most. I know. His eyes met mine, full of regret. Every night I thought about you. I saw you in my dreams holding that baby struggling alone. I wanted to call, but I was too proud. I told myself it was too late. But when I saw you at the wedding, he paused, voice cracking. When I saw that little boy, I realized how much I'd lost. Before I could reply, a small yawn came from behind me. Noah shuffled out of the bedroom, rubbing his eyes, his hair sticking up. Mama, who's that? He asked sleepily. My father's eyes softened. Hello, young man, he said quietly. Noah blinked at him, then smiled shyly. Are you Nana's friend? My father hesitated. Something like that, he murmured. Noah grinned and held up one of his toy cars. Do you want to play? For a moment, my father looked like he didn't know what to do. Then slowly he knelt down. His knees cracked a little and he chuckled. Sure, he said, taking the tiny car in his large, calloused hands. Show me how it works. Noah laughed and demonstrated, his voice full of excitement. I watched from the kitchen, tears blurring my vision. My father, this proud, distant man, was sitting on the floor, letting a 5-year-old teach him how to race toy cars. Minutes turned into an hour. Noah's laughter filled the small room like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. My father looked up at me once, eyes glistening. "He's a good boy," he said quietly. "He is," I whispered back. He nodded slowly. "You raised him well, better than I ever raised you." His voice cracked again. "I'm sorry, Lena, for everything. For throwing you out, for not being there." I stepped closer, my throat tight. "I forgive you," I said softly. And for the first time I meant it. He smiled faintly, wiping a tear before Noah could see. "Can I visit again?" he asked. I nodded. "I'd like that." As he stood to leave, Noah ran to the door and waved. "Bye, Grandpa." My father froze. His hand trembled on the doorknob. Then slowly he turned and smiled. "Bye, Noah." And in that single word, years of silence melted away. A week later, our small apartment looked brighter than ever. The morning sun streamed through the window as the smell of pancakes filled the air. Noah sat at the table, humming softly while my mother flipped pancakes and my father poured syrup with exaggerated care, pretending it was a serious mission. Watching them together felt like watching something fragile come back to life, slowly, carefully, beautifully. For the first time in years, there was laughter. Real laughter. My father chuckled when Noah called him Grandpa Racer, a title he'd earned after losing yet another toy car race. My mother smiled at the sound, glancing at me with tears of joy she no longer tried to hide. It was surreal. 5 years ago, I'd walked away from that family, broken, alone, terrified, and now somehow the same people who once turned their backs on me were sitting at my kitchen table, sharing breakfast with my son. Life had come full circle in the most unexpected way. After breakfast, Noah ran to his room to fetch his drawings. "Look, Grandpa, this is you and Nana and Mama and me," he said proudly, holding up a colorful page. My father took it carefully, studying every crayon stroke. The drawing was simple but full of love. 4 stick figures holding hands under a yellow sun. My father's lips trembled. "That's beautiful," he whispered. Then he looked at me. "You've raised him well, Lena. You gave him what we couldn't give you, love without condition." His words hit me harder than I expected. I blinked away tears, my heart swelling with both sorrow and gratitude. "It wasn't easy," I said softly, "but he gave me strength. He reminded me that even when people leave, love doesn't have to." My mother placed her hand over mine. "And we'll spend the rest of our lives proving that love still lives here too," she said gently. We spent that day together, talking, laughing, cooking. It wasn't perfect. There were awkward pauses, moments of unspoken regret, but there was also peace, a peace I thought I'd never feel again. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, we sat outside on the small balcony. Noah sat in my father's lap listening as he told him an old bedtime story about bravery and forgiveness. My mother leaned against the railing, smiling quietly, her eyes soft with pride. When the story ended and Noah drifted off to sleep, I turned to my father. "I used to dream about this," I said softly. "About you forgiving me. About us being a family again." He looked at me, his eyes glistening. "No, Lena," he said gently. "It wasn't you who needed forgiving. It was us." He paused, exhaling slowly. "I spent years thinking pride was strength. But pride breaks families. Love is what keeps them alive." His words echoed in the cool night air, and I knew I'd remember them forever. We sat there for a long time, just listening to the city's hum below and the soft breathing of the little boy who had unknowingly healed 3 broken hearts. Later that night, after my parents left, I tucked Noah into bed. He stirred slightly and whispered, "Mama, are we a family now?" Tears filled my eyes. I kissed his forehead and smiled. "Yes, baby. We always were." I stood by the window, looking out at the stars, thinking about how life had changed. Forgiveness hadn't erased the past. It had rewritten it with understanding. The pain hadn't disappeared, but it had turned into strength. And in that strength, love had found a new home. Sometimes the greatest kindness we can show isn't to others, it's to ourselves. It's the courage to forgive, to let go, and to open the door when the past knocks again. I thought of my parents walking home together, my father's arm around my mother's shoulders, their hearts lighter than they'd been in years. Maybe we couldn't get back the time we lost, but we could fill the time we had left with love. And that was enough.